Hey there, magical experimenters. This is Taylor Ellwood here. And go ahead and hit the subscribe button if you're new to this channel and hit the notification bell so you get notified. And otherwise, drop a like or a comment if you want to, if you feel so inclined. So, today I want to talk about how to identify and dissolve ancestral blockages because I think this is a really important thing. When we talk about blockages, we're really talking about dealing with the internal work component of our lives. And a lot of times when we're dealing with blockages, it is our own stuff, it's our own baggage. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's the baggage that our ancestors bring to us. And case in point, I was away on this trip and I was talking with my mom, and we ended up talking about my dearly departed dad. And she said that back when she was with him a long time ago, he would say, "I love you" to her a lot. Like he would love bomb her basically. And it was a bit of a narcissistic thing to do. I mean, my dad was a narcissist, so no surprise there. But I really got to thinking about that, and I thought about it in relationship to kind of some of my own patterns in my life, um, and and my own experiences in life, because my experiences with like dealing with wanting to be recognized, for example, by other people, wanting to be valued. These are things that I've had to work with and through. And I woke up. I woke up after I had I had this in conversation with my magical partner about this. And the next morning, I woke up and I had this deep sense of compassion and empathy for my dad that I had not felt before, because I realized how terribly alone he must have felt. Like, to be saying "I love you" all the time, to be wanting that reassurance, because he wasn't saying "I love you" because he necessarily loved my mom. I mean, he may have, he may not have, but he was saying "I love you" because he wanted to be reassured that he was loved. He wanted to be reassured that he was valued. And that got me thinking about some of the other things that I had discovered, um, in regards to my dad and his side of the family. Like, the second to last meeting before he died that I saw him, I asked him a lot of questions, and I ended up learning that he had had a fairly abusive childhood. And it didn't surprise me, but he had never opened up to me before about it. So I suddenly learned these things about him, and so then I thought about my grandfather and what he'd put my dad through. And then I began to think about my grandfather, and I'm like, well, what did he go through? Because, these kinds of things they don't happen in a void for the most part. And what I ended up realizing is that really this is an ancestral blockage. I know of at least two ancestors, maybe even more, that this is a true case, and it has impacted my life. It has impacted the lives of my family. It's an ancestral blockage. And there's ancestral blockages on my mom's side of the family too. I want to be clear about that. But I'm dealing with my dad's side right now because this is what's freshest. And really, if you look at your own family, you're going to have these ancestral blockages too. This is a thing that's key to identifying within yourself. Like, when you look at your behaviors and you look at the baggage and the issues that you're dealing with, a good question you want to ask yourself is, where does that come from? Some of it is going to be you. But like, that desire for me to be recognized didn't just come from me. It came from my family. I remember that after my dad died, we're sorting through a bunch of things, and one of the things we found is we found this scrapbook where my grandma had underlined every mention of the name Ellwood in the local newspaper, and sometimes underlined it vigorously a couple times through. I mean, this was not. So this told me that my dad's narcissism wasn't something that just came about from him. It was an environmental thing. It was fed by his mom and by his dad. It probably went back even further than that. It was this need to have the Ellwood name have prestige, whatever that means. And the key thing that I ended up realizing is, here it is. I've got this line of ancestors, and this issue, this blockage within my heart, and it's affecting my behaviors now. It's affecting how I show up now. Do I want to continue that? I don't. But it's not enough for me to just do this work on myself. I've also got to work with my ancestors. So what I ended up doing is I did Shingon or Qigong, Shingon, God's playing in the clouds, which is just like this really deep meditative movement of Qigong. And you don't have to do that. You can do whatever works for you. Okay. So, I mean, it could be, you could do some kind of path working, whatever. But I started to work with this blockage. And what I did is I worked with it through time. I ended up massaging, I ended up sending this dissolving energy back toward my ancestors, toward my dad, toward my grandfather, my grandmother, and toward the ancestors that went beyond that, with the idea that I was going to genuinely work through and relax and release these areas of tension, not just for myself, but for my ancestors. So what I was really doing is I was doing this work to heal myself and to heal my ancestors at the same time. Now, my ancestors are dead and gone, but that doesn't mean that that healing isn't needed. It doesn't mean that there isn't a connection there across time. And I mean, I could even put it beyond that, and I could put it toward my descendants. Now, I'm never going to have any kids because I've made sure of that. But I could put it toward my my nephews, for example. I could put it toward their descendants. I could put it toward the rest of my, and I could put it toward my spiritual descendants, right? The people who perhaps become part of my spiritual lineage. So they're not, because again, I mean, you can look at this notion of ancestral blockage and apply it not just to your physical ancestors, but even your spiritual ancestors, right? It's going to show up differently with your spiritual ancestors, but there is going to be that aspect that could play a role. So, these things. So identifying it really comes down to, here's the impact this person had on my life. But what was the impact that they experienced? Like, who had that impact on them? And feeling a sense of compassion, that's the first step. Because if you can feel compassion toward the people that came before you, and I'm not saying that compassion has to be forgiveness. That's not what I'm talking about. Forgiveness and compassion are two very different things. You could feel compassion for somebody and still not necessarily be able to fully forgive them. What you're showing them is like, I recognize that this person went through something too. And that contributed to why they showed up in my life the way they did. It doesn't excuse them. Like, it doesn't excuse my dad that he was a narcissist and that he was mentally and physically abusive to me. That doesn't excuse anything in regards to him. It just helps me understand where he came from and to feel a sense of compassion for him and to start that dissolving process so that perhaps his spirit, wherever it is, can be more at peace and at rest. And at the same time, I can move on in my life and be in more peace and in rest than I would be otherwise. And this is an important thing. So when we look at our ancestral blockages, we really want to pay attention to this notion and understanding that your ancestral blockage is really the people who came before, but it's also recognizing how it impacts your behavior now and recognizing how you may be contributing to that behavior. Now, this is the uncomfortable part for people. Like, what do you mean me contributing? Well, I mean, in my case, I can say that, getting fixated on being recognized, feeling super competitive with people, this was an ancestral blockage. Yes, but I also perpetuated it for a while. I no longer am. I've let go of that need to compete. I've let go of the need to be recognized. I mean, whoever comes my way, great. I appreciate it. But at the end of the day, I find that, in doing that, that's allowed me to do the healing on my end and to tie off and wrap up that thing so it no longer continues to go forward. So those are the things that you want to keep in mind with this kind of work. The other thing that you really want to keep in mind is that you want to be compassionate towards yourself. You're going to feel compassion towards your ancestors. Make sure you feel some compassion towards yourself. Be gentle with yourself. Recognize that, these things that have happened, they are part of your life, but they don't have to define you. They can simply be acknowledged and recognized and worked with. And this can be a very powerful way for you to move on. This weekend, I'm going to be doing a ritual around this work. And afterwards, I will do a video and share with you guys what I did. So I'm going to wrap up for right now. But this is kind of part one of this series. And I hope it helps those of you who need it. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Friday.